The number on the page is roughly $4.25 billion, and what the record chooses not to place beside it is a date. That silence is already doing work, because a capital raise of this scale directed at high bandwidth memory of the HBM3 generation would ordinarily produce a production schedule. The disclosure filed by the Chinese memory maker, known as Changshin Memory Technologies, does not produce one. Read it once, and a funded challenger is taking shape. Read it twice, and the arrival keeps being deferred, and the document was never going to tell you that. We will read this disclosure twice. First for what it plainly establishes, then for what it carefully declines to say. The record opens on a capital commitment, approximately $4.25 billion directed at expanding production capacity. That figure is not a research budget or a feasibility study. It is an industrial commitment of a size that serious fabs measure themselves against. The disclosure then names a DRAM production base of roughly 300,000 wafers per month, which constitutes a genuine manufacturing operation, not a pilot line, not a demonstration. Within that base, the document designates approximately 60,000 wafers per month for high-bandwidth memory at the HBM3 specification, the generation currently required to feed commercial artificial intelligence accelerators at meaningful scale. The equipment layer is also named. Domestic suppliers, specifically Nara and Suzhou Maxwell, are identified as the tooling foundation for the expansion. The record frames them not as a contingency, but as the plan. On its face, then, the disclosure establishes that capital is committed, that capacity is designated, and that a domestic supply chain has been identified and named. A reader who stops at the first pass holds a document that describes a challenger arriving with funding, a wafer allocation, and a sourcing strategy. The record says all of that plainly. Reading it again, something else becomes visible. The disclosure does not name a mass production date. In a capital raise of approximately $4 billion, that absence is not a formatting decision. Investors pricing a commitment of this magnitude typically receive a production schedule, or at minimum a qualification target against which the capital can be measured. The record does not produce one. The column where the date belongs is blank, and a blank in a document this deliberate is not nothing. It reflects what the issuer could not credibly commit to print, which is itself information. The document's silence on timing is a statement about the state of the process, not an omission the drafter forgot to fill. The disclosure also does not mention HBM4. Samsung and SK Hynix are already shipping the HBM4 generation commercially. The Changshin Memory Technologies document frames HBM3 as the target without acknowledging that the target has moved, that the competitive reference point will have advanced further before the wafers the raise funds are qualified, and shipping. A document that records a destination without recording where the destination has traveled since the document was written is presenting a version of the story the current moment has already superseded. The record is accurate to its date. The silence is about everything the field did afterward. Designating 60,000 wafers per month for HBM3 is roughly analogous to a construction firm announcing it has reserved steel tonnage for a bridge. The material commitment is real. The crossing is not. The steel does not span the river. The qualification process does, and the qualification process has its own timeline, which this document declines to enter. The disclosure does not compare its 60,000 designated wafers to the volumes of the companies it is implicitly measuring itself against. Analyst estimates place Samsung near 700,000 HBM wafers per month. SK Hynix runs near 600,000. Both figures belong to HBM4, not HBM3. The Changshin Memory Technologies document offers no ratio, no competitive placement, no acknowledgement that 60,000 wafers is roughly a tenth of either incumbent's output at a prior generation. The omission of a comparative figure is not neutrality. A record that states its own capacity without stating the field's capacity forecloses the calculation the reader most needs to make. It presents the 60,000 figure in isolation, and isolation flatters it. The document also does not settle whether 60,000 wafers represents a current run rate, a stated target, or a permitted allocation under existing fab capacity. Those are meaningfully different claims. A run rate is what the line is doing today. A target is what the plan says it will do. A permitted allocation is what the approved capacity allows on paper. The record does not distinguish among them, and the distinction carries significant weight for anyone trying to read the timeline the document omits. The disclosure does not indicate whether the domestic tooling from Nara and Suzhou Maxwell has reached the lithographic and deposition specifications that HBM3 stacking requires at yield. That data belongs to engineering reports the record does not cite and does not summarize. Naming a supplier is not the same as confirming the supplier's process node is qualified for the application. The record names them. It does not confirm the second thing. A funding disclosure is not a production audit. It records what capital is committed. It does not record what the equipment can presently do, what the yield curve looks like, or whether the qualification timeline the document omits is 6 months or 24. Reports suggesting that volume HBM3 production in 2026 is now considered unlikely come from analysts and industry sources, not from a subsequent Changshin Memory Technologies filing. The original document has not been publicly amended or corrected. The timeline slip is visible in secondary coverage, not in the record itself, which means the record has not yet absorbed the information that has overtaken it. What the document cannot settle, whether the tools are ready, whether the yield is there, whether 2026 or 2027 or some later date is the realistic horizon, remains outside the text. A close reading that mistakes the capital commitment for a production commitment will misread the record in precisely the way the record invites you to. Read together, the two passes of this disclosure arrive at something the document does not state on its face. The raise specifies everything about the money and nothing about the moment. The domestic tooling pivot is written into the equipment list. The cost of that pivot is written into the missing date. The export restrictions that produced the Nara and Suzhou Maxwell sourcing are the same restrictions that made a production schedule too uncertain to publish. The restriction is in the text. What it deferred is in the margins. The domestic supply chain named in the document is a consequence of the same policy environment that made a timeline impossible to commit to in writing. Those two facts sit in the same filing, one stated, one visible, only in the blank. The record shows the pivot. The record does not show what the pivot cost in time, and time is what the competitive gap between 60,000 wafers and 700,000 wafers is actually measured in. $4 billion is a statement of intent, and the date it declines to name is the rest of the sentence. The next document to read closely is the one Changshin Memory Technologies has not yet filed. A qualification report, a customer sampling announcement, or a revised production timeline. When that record appears, watch for what generation it names, and watch for whether it still declines to say when. If you want to read the next document alongside us, subscribe and turn on notifications. The channel reads the text, both passes.